Okay, with the start of season 2022, Riot released a new cinematic starring Talia, Kai'San Rek'Sai on Shurima's side, Sejuani, Olaf and Volibear on Freljord's side, and Pantheon and Leona on Mount Targon. Of these three, we have two stories that gives us some context behind. To begin with, what are Sejuani and Olaf doing on our sign territory, and what has Horn to do with all this? To answer that, we'll have to take a look at the story called Dead of Winter. This one will be quick. A dark winter is coming to the Freljord. The Avarosans retreated their herds to the south, but that's not how Sejuani does things on the Winter's Claw. A group of hunters led by the War Mother herself were hunting down a mammoth. They've been following it for a few days. They've managed to push it to a cliff on a mountain near the territory of the Ursines. It was here that Olaf joins the group. He just returned from his adventures on the south. Although he didn't want to talk about that. Yeah, why don't we all forget that thing existed, okay? Here it's mentioned that Olaf was as tall as Sejuani riding Bristle. Some believed his mother laid with a troll, but no one dared to say that to him. With the Berserker's help, they took down the mammoth. The group parted with 10 hunters and would return with just 5, plus Olaf. Unfortunately, it wouldn't go that easily, and in a desperate attempt, the beast took a step back and fell down the mountain. Olaf said it wasn't that bad, it saved them having to drag the body back, but then the ice under the mammoth breaks. It fell in a frozen river, not solid rock, and their hunt falls in the cold waters as Sejuani curses her luck. The trip back to the Claw's camp took them 2 days. Until her frustration, the serious prediction of the War Mother's group coming back with no food became real. That was a bad omen. She had to do something. The Winter's Claw was already scattered in small groups across their territory. The tribe seer asked her up front how shall they survive. In other occasions, she would have killed him for such insolence, but it was a fair question, and the rest wanted an answer too. She promised to give them one tomorrow. Fortunately, the other hunting groups bring something. Later that night, Sejuani brushed Bristle's fur to clear off her mind. Some of the warriors suggest to make peace with the Avarosans. Others to gather all they had and charge into their territory. If they couldn't survive, at least they'll take as much of Ash's people with them. Seju's frustration startles her mount, and a silhouette in the corner tells her to be careful. She takes out her knife immediately. Lying on a makeshift bed of straws was a wretched old man left to die months ago. His legs were stumps that ended up just above the knee, and his eyes were as white as snow. His name was Krieg, from the Olgavana tribe, or well, last survivor of the Olgavana tribe. They were once builders and farmers that refused to join the Winter's Claw, and so she sent her warriors to take care of them. When they came back, Orkath, the leader of that hunting group, brought him tied to his back. He seemed confused. He just said that the mountain asked him to bring the blind man here. She ordered the rest not to feed him. It'll be the Freljord the one to claim the man's life. And here he was, months after that, alive and still with the Winter's Claw for some reason. Krieg tells her that he heard she glimpsed the realm of the Lost Ones. Didn't envy her. He saw it too when her hunters drove them to Hearthome. She tells him that those eyes haven't seen nothing in years, and it was true. The world went wide when he was 10. But some things are best seen with the eyes closed, and calls her lass. Sejuani threatens to cut his throat if you dare to call her dad again. And she was right, she was no lass. She's War Mother now. She better remember that next time a seer tells her what to do. He explains that just as some warriors claim to feel their limbs long after losing them in battle, it was the same with his eyes, and now he could see more than he ever did. More than he ever wished, in fact. She says that he had no idea the thing she saw, but somehow he knew it, since the day she and the Spirit Walker made a deal with the Lost Ones. The mere mention of that day fills Sejuani with savage instinct, clouds her mind, and the taste of fire engulfs her mouth. She shakes the idea out of her head, and asks him, how is he still alive? Krieg says that Orn fed him before her killers appeared out of the smoke and brought him here. He held him and gave him a mouthful of his cauldron. Sejuani just sighs. It was infuriating that someone on her tribe disobeyed her. But Krieg takes her from the wrist and swears on his honor that no scrap of food or water had touched his lips since he came here. Just a mouthful of Ornn's grand cauldron could feed a whole company for a year. But those were just legends, one of those tales they tell children. But where did she thought those legends came from but the truth? He left the forest covering his body, his flesh ruddy and pink and his belly full and soft with fat in contrast with Seju's ivory pale skin and flesh bow tight over her frame. Astonished, she asks, how? Krieg says that the Grand Cauldron of Ornn was stolen by the Lost Ones in spite. Said that Ornn was too soft on mortals that if they could fill their bellies anytime they wanted, they became spoiled and weak. And so they killed his followers and took it to their mountain, where its powers now paint the sky with blood-red light. But Ornn's magic couldn't stay hidden forever. Not even the Lost Ones couldn't do that. If not, ask that Speedwalker friend of hers. Odir was out of the picture for now. He walked into the blizzard, saying he needed to find a way to strengthen his will. In other words, he is gone to take a rework. Sejuani didn't understand why he was helping her warriors slew his tribe. The timbre of Krieg's voice deepened. We are all one tribe, he said, and it's long past time she understood that. There is a season for fighting, a season for leading, and yeah, a season for dying. But a time is coming when the sons and daughters of Freljord must stand together, or you will all die. The decision was hers. The next morning, Sejuani made a choice, but the others wouldn't like it. And so she told Olaf first. They were coming back to the mountain, to the domain of the Ursines. They were taking back the Grand Cauldron of Ornn. That really sounded like a glorious death, and so Olaf was in. That's basically what we get to see in the cinematic. A group of the Winter's Claw marching into the Ursine territory. I wanted to point out how Olaf breaks a giant ice chunk on his back and then throws one of his axes to an avatar of the Volibear. Yeah, that's not the true Valkyr of Storms. That's just one of the Ursines transformed by his magic to look like him. The true thousand-pierced bear is up there in the sky. There's not much to tell from this side. I guess Ornn's gonna wait for his cauldron or something. And just as a side note, that Krieg guy has appeared before on Ornn's color story, the voice from the heart. It was him who led the survivors of his tribe to the primal god's volcano. Okay, now from Shurima's side, Kai'Sa and Thalia arrive on a ghost town with a giant stone statue on the middle. This is no more than Zolan after the events of the Nameless God, which we covered in the last video by the way. But how did these two get here, and when did they even meet? For that we'll need to take a look at Hollowspawn, which was released an hour before the cinematic. This is a bit more longer. We'll start with Kai'Sa. She comes out of a tunnel to a chasm on the desert, filled with thousands of small tunnels. But something was off. This tunnel ran in a straight line to the north. She's been following it for 4 days. Unlike the rest of halls dug by Voidborn, this was made with a purpose in mind. Using her Void Seekers, she finds a hole that seems to continue the tunnel. Her missile hits something alive. Kai'Sa marks its entrance, and a Voidling emerges from it. It was a new species. The creature's smooth, rounded body deforms as it opens its long lower jaw. Its mouth is filled with translucent needle-like teeth, jutting out at dangerous angles. Its sides expand and contract like it's breathing or taking in essence. The monster begins to glow, emerging a tongue that emits a soft blue light. She'd call it lamplight. She sends another missile, and the creature lets out a shriek and then dodges it. The entire tunnel begins to glow behind it. It called for help. 100 more lamplights were moving toward Kai'Sa. She tries to climb up the fissure, but her hands grab its hand. She had to fight, but then the wall around the Voidlings began to crack and crumbles, leaving just 3. Now she could handle that. Kai'Sa takes care of 2. The last one hits her side, breaking a few ribs. She manages to take it under the barbs and finish it with a plasma shot. When it's finally over, she notices a row of stone cubes conveniently aligned in a chasm wall. She uses them to climb. It was already night. Looking around in the moonlight, she sees no landmarks, just dunes and rocky cliffs. A sandstorm kicks up in the distance. She glances down into the chasm. If she squints, she can almost make out a glow. The wind gets loud. Storm is approaching fast. She turns to face it. At the center of the storm was a girl? The ground bars beneath Kaisa. Her attacker wanted to bring her closer, but she couldn't do much with her grips broken. The second skin didn't have time to heal the wound. Her red scarf, studded with stones, wraps around her shoulder pads and wrist, slamming her to the ground and breaking her helm. She recomposed herself, set her hands alight, but then sees the look of surprise and horror of the girl's face. She apologized. She thought she was a monster. The girl's not as young as she thought. She must be around her own age or older. She lifts the scarf out of the ground. If she could control the stone, that meant she helped her with those things. She shrugs, says she felt someone was still down there fighting. She's been doing this for weeks now, maybe months. Kaisa blinks, her eyes stinging. Finally, someone's fighting against the void too. She asks her name and says she was Talia. She takes Kaisa to her camp. They were a group of 30 or 40, mostly children and elders, surrounding a large fire pit. The tents were cobbled with fabrics and solid slabs of rock. Among these people were Talia lore followers, Samir, Kadira, and Saiva. At first they were wary of her, but after Talia introduced her with the rest as if she wasn't wearing a void symbiote and Samir gave her a cooked sand snake, the camp begins to relax. Her second skin chuffed and relieved. The taste bring old memories of the dinners her parents used to make, but no good came from dwelling on that. The look on Talia's eyes were clear. She wanted her to stay, on which she agrees. She'll stay for the night, to heal. Through the night, Kaisa indulges in both food and stories. Everyone has a tale to tell. The younger children speak of how their homes fell into the sand and how much they miss their families and hoping to reunite with them soon. But she knew those people weren't coming back. They were swallowed by the void. The elders speak of the sun-blessed ascent of old and the betrayal of the last emperor. Zaifa describes the corruption of those heroes and how we're turned into the darkness. Kadira speaks of a place called Zolan beyond the Cycle Lake, filled with libraries, gardens that people live without fear. Kaisa didn't notice she scoffed until the children looked at her. There was no place safe from the void, especially not that close to the Cycle Lake. Kadira insists it was real. Where did she thought they were all heading? That makes the huntress stand up and look for Talia. She was in a tent with Samir and Saifa tracing a line on a map. She wasn't planning to look for this Zolan, right? They show her a map of Eastern Shurima. They were heading north of the Cycle Lake, same direction the tunnel Kaisa's been following. She couldn't risk all these people's lives for a myth. The Cycle Lake was the nest of the Zurzai. Crossing it was a death sentence. Talia says that if they weren't to turn back, they ran out of supplies. This was their only hope. Kaisa says she had no idea what those things meant, but she's dealt with Voidborns before when she was overwhelmed. The huntress could see the determination in her eyes. Besides, Samir adds that they had a plan. Talia will make a bridge over the desert for them while he distracts the beasts. Kaisa knew that wouldn't work. The children of the queen, all they do is devour. Once they hear him, they'll hound him, and won't stop until they close their teeth on his bones. Talia asks her to come with them, but she refuses. They weren't taking that route. Best they could do was make their way around the side, take as many as she could, leave the slowest behind. But that's not how she did things. Our world is a tapestry, she says, and every life is a thread of a different color. Kaisa hit her with another metaphor. In that case, the void is a flame. It makes everything it touches. If your tapestry catches fire, the entire thing will burn, unless you cut the smoldering threads away. But she was wrong. Any thread that drops makes it unstable, and she won't let any of them go. The next morning, the camp slept through the heat of the day. The weaver asked Kaisa if she changed her mind. She was nibbling her bread, trying to make it last. After collapsing the tent back into the earth, she notices the sheen of sweat on Talia's brow. This exhausted her more than she let on. The best way she could help was figuring out what made the tunnel underground, but she doesn't say that. Instead, she leaves with, "I hope you can help them yourself." Back underground, Kaisa sees older holes punctuating the passage. Those were Zurzai tunnels, but she hasn't seen any yet. and she was below the Cycle Lake. She notices a blue glow coming out of one of the entrances, a group of Zersei callers and hatchlings surrounding a dozen of lamplights. One of them had Kaisan marks on its side. Talia's attack didn't kill any of them. A hatchling stalks over the marked creature. It extends its tongue and touches the creature's horn. It begins to glow. The sudden chattering of colors draws near the others to receive the glow. Was it powering them? Whatever it is, she's going to stop them. But a loud boom shakes the earth. An enormous Doombreaker cuts through the stone wall and slices all the lamplights it can. It didn't like what those things were doing to the hatchlings. The lamplights flees towards her and she uses her camouflage to avoid them. They were heading northwards. She wanted to follow them, understand what they were doing, but then she heard human screams. It came from the crevice the Doombreaker made. A stone platform dangles over the edge. The people standing on the top are screaming, but Talia stays calm, trying to keep the structure from falling. The huntress warns her to come back, but Talia won't leave Samir behind. She manages to stabilize the structure but ends up falling. Kadir and Saifa comes running from the bridge, but Kaisa fires at their feet. The Doombreaker could turn back any moment. They had to get the others out of here. They refused, saying they wouldn't let them behind. She considers killing them both, that way the others would flee, but she didn't want to harm them after all they shared together. She'll come down and help them, but the rest needed someone to be strong. And at last both girls agree. She hits the bottom hard enough to break her bones. At the distance, she sees the glowing voidlings and the remaining lamplights surrounding a stone dome. That's where Talia and Samir were hiding. She uses her camouflage to take the colors out. The limelights notice her after dealing with the hatchlings. They charge towards her and is quickly overwhelmed by their barbed tongues, breaking parts of her armor. But something bars under her feet. Talia takes her head out of the dome, asking her to go towards the center, to then hurl her with a W. The floor which she lands is filled with small sharp bumps. The lamplight with her mark runs toward her, and it's killed by a shard of stone coming from the ground. The Weaver tells her to keep running. That activated the traps. She runs circling their dome. The lamplights learn, slowing down their pace, making themselves easy targets for Kaisa's missiles. Taking most of them down, but she had no energy left, and enters Talia's dome. She was exhausted too. Samir helped her to stand on her feet. The earth starts to rumble. The Doombreaker was looking for the lamplights. Kaisa takes Talia on her arms and tells Samir to cling on her back. They run towards the wall of the entrance. Then Talia twists out of Kaisa's grip. Gathering all her strength, she summons a platform and propels them all upwards, just short of the surface. They grab the ridge, doing their best to hold on, and a dozen of hands help them get out. It was Talia's group. Beneath them, the Doombreaker breaks into the cave, smashing frantically the remaining lamplights. Kaisa asks them to stand still. The Doombreaker couldn't see things it cannot sense. Until they're all sure it's gone, no one moves. And an exhausted Talia creates another stone bridge to take them out of the Cycle Lake. Later that day, Talia's bridges made a wall around the camp outside the desert. Kaisa kept her distance to hide her scars. The Weaver offers her a bowl of cabbage and millet, but she was still angry. She put all these people in danger just for save one person. And she points out that was exactly what she did when she went down there to save her. She didn't know how to respond to that. After a few moments of awkward silence, she asks her not to go to Zolan. The passage she was following was directly below the route. That means the void had already taken Zolan. There was no safe place beyond the Sai. Talia sighs. She'll tell the others they had to find a new place to live, but she was still heading to Zolan. If there was people trapped in there, she had to help them. Kaisa sees the hope in her eyes. Perhaps if she was there when her village was attacked, things could have been different. At last, she accepts. Another thread for the tapestry. Next morning, Talia waves goodbye to the others. Zaifa found a spot on the map, an old trade city that should lead them through grazing land. And so, the Stone Weaver and the Daughter of the Void part on a floating bridge over the Cycle Lake, to the ancient city of Zolan. And that's what we see in the cinematic. I wanted to point out the size of this carved on Zolani's statue. On the Faceless God, it tells us that the most vicious of Darkins gave her a lethal blow that laid her down for centuries. It's very possible that the same Darkin put that scar on the statue, and just for the size of the hole, it could have been Atrox responsible for that. At arriving, there were no survivors left. The hole from which the Kog'Maw-looking things emerges on the story cannot be seen in this shot. Instead, they are received by Cersei. They deal with some of the monsters until a giant tunnel opens behind them. The Queen was here. Kaisa gives her a last look before being sent flying by Rek'Sai. Once both of them fall into the hole, Talia uses her powers to throw the statue on the Cersei to stop them, while Kaisa descended deep into the tunnel. We have no clue where she's heading to. Maybe that's the inverted city mentioned on the Feast of the Prophet, which we covered in the last video. Whatever it is, I'm sure we'll find out later with the release of the Void Jungler. Okay, to wrap this up, we have Pantheon vs Leona. Atreus arrives somewhere on Mount Targon and is received by a group of soldiers. Solaris soldiers, we'll assume. He lowers his spear and they take a battle stance. After taking care of them with no effort, the Radiant Dawn Leona falls from the skies. They cross shields, battle for a bit, and then a star or comet crashes towards the aspects, sending Pantheon mounting down. Then he looks up, more comets were on his way. Gathering the strength of the fallen soldiers, he casts his ultimate to face something in the stars. The effects and colors of the meteors might suggest that those are Aurelian stars, but how did the Star Forger free himself from the aspect's chains? Well, I may have an explanation for that, but we'll have to take the Sentinels event as canon, so yeah, take that with a grain of salt if you want. Atreus arrives on Mount Targon after the Ruination event. That's why the Solaris and Leona received him this way, because, you know, Pantheon was corrupted. Both aspects start to fight and then Aurelian's comet comes in. The reason why his chains were weakened might be to the aspect's corruption. That allowed him to throw his stars to Runeterra. And yeah, there's no much to tell from Targon's side, so that might be it for today. I think the next video will be about the new Zone champion, Zeri. So yeah, remember to subscribe and hit the like button, turn on notifications and all that stuff. My name is Rem, and see you all next time, bye bye!